Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This is Selena and Sophia, and today we are going to be talking about the epinephrine signaling pathway and how it relates to heart rate. And we are period 1, video number 7. So the epinephrine or adrenaline signaling pathway is a G protein coupled receptor pathway, for short GPCR, and the purpose of this is to convert extracellular signals to responses, and this includes hormones, neurotransmitters, and more. Specifically for epinephrine, this signaling pathway's purpose is to increase the amount of glucose released. So let's talk about some advantages of the epinephrine signaling pathway. One is that it triggers a fight or flight response. So this is incredibly important for self-defense. So think about it. When you undergo the signaling pathway, your heart rate increases a lot. This allows you to run a lot faster or to have a lot better physical ability to fight off any predators in the wild. And for disadvantages, one of them is that it can cause heart palpitations. This is from too much stress where your heart is beating too fast. Another is that for specifically GPCR, there's a lack of high affinity antibodies to GPCR themselves. So how exactly does this G protein coupled receptor pathway work? Well, let's start by drawing out the membrane. So above is the outer membrane, below is the inner membrane, and in between we have all of these hydrophobic tails. And then here we're going to be drawing out the G protein coupled receptor, and attached to it is the alpha subunit. Then we have the beta subunit and the gamma subunit. And notice how the alpha and gamma subunits are directly attached to that membrane. So attached to the alpha subunit, we have a GDP molecule, and this is the GPCR, and then we have a ligand or a signaling molecule that's coming in. So when the ligand binds to the receptor, as shown, the receptor undergoes a conformational change where it changes shape. So when this happens, the GDP turns into GTP, and the alpha subunit separates from the beta and gamma subunits. The alpha subunit then travels to find a specific protein located along the membrane. Once the alpha subunit has binded to the protein, it will trigger a signal transduction cascade. Let's get into the details about the adrenaline or epinephrine signaling pathway. So our ligand or signal molecule in this case is called epinephrine, and we know that it's hydrophilic because its receptor is located on the surface of the cell membrane. I'll draw it out for you right here. We also know that our receptor is something called the beta adrenergic receptor. This is a G protein coupled receptor. And finally, we have our protein, and this is what the alpha subunit is going to attach to. And in this case, it's called adenylate cyclase. Next, let's take a look at the specific sequence of events in this epinephrine signaling pathway.
When epinephrine binds to the G protein coupled receptor, the GPCR undergoes a conformational change and triggers a signal transduction cascade, which switches GDP to GTP on the alpha subunit, which separates it from the beta and gamma units. The alpha subunit then needs a protein to attach to and chooses to attach to adenylate cyclase. Cyclic AMP becomes produced from ATP, which is a second messenger molecule. Then, cyclic AMP activates protein kinase A, also known as pKa. One path that pKa goes down is to deactivate glycogen synthase. We don't want glycogen synthase to be produced, so as a result, phosphorylation inhibits glycogen synthase, which prevents new glycogen molecules from forming when glycogen needs to be broken down. This then converts ATP into ADP. A second pathway that active pKa goes down is to activate phosphorylase kinase. In this process, ATP gets converted into ADP. And that's a wrap on our cellular response process with adrenaline, or epinephrine. Thank you.
Let's talk about the intended response for the epinephrine signaling pathway. So first, with the glycogen synthase enzyme, the activity of this is decreased. This is because phosphorylation with ATP actually inhibits the enzyme, and so this prevents new glycogen molecules from being formed when glycogen needs to be broken down. The next one is glycogen phosphorylase. So this one, the activity actually increases, and this is because phosphorylation activates the enzyme. And so what happens is that releases more glucose. Overall, there is a significant increase in glucose production with the epinephrine signaling pathway, and this is because we need energy for that fight or flight response. So this includes factors such as increasing heart rate, faster breathing, and improved physical ability and endurance. Alright, taking a deeper look at epinephrine, we can say that it's an agonist. So this is because it activates the receptor rather than inhibiting it. What's more is that epinephrine is an endogenous catecholamine. And what this means is that it's produced inside the body. So it increases our systematic resistance and increases blood pressure. And what happens is that our heart rate spikes up. Let's talk about how this epinephrine signaling pathway terminates. So just to review, let's draw out the cell membrane here. And right here we have the GPCR, the alpha subunit, beta and gamma subunit, and the GDP that's attached to the alpha subunit. So the alpha subunit on G protein is activated by beta adrenergic receptor, which is caused by phosphorylation of GDP to GTP. So once this alpha subunit has GTP, it's able to bind to that adenylate cyclase because the GTP makes it have a high affinity. And so once it binds, it causes a signal cascade, and that's what causes a response. So what happens when GTP on the G alpha protein turns back into GDP? Well, once the GTP is turned back into GDP, it decreases the affinity for attaching to the adenylate cyclase. So it's actually going to dissociate from the protein and the response is stopped. But luckily, this is naturally occurring in our body. So the G alpha protein has the ability to hydrolyze GTP to GDP in something called GTPase activity. So there's a timer in our bodies for hydrolysis, which occurs within a few seconds to a few minutes after the protein has been activated. And this is good because it's still enough time for the epinephrine to carry out its function. So once the pathway is stopped, this is when the amount of glucose released decreases, it slows down, and our heart rate also slows down, as well as our breathing, which returns to normal. That was all for today's lesson. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope to see you next time. Please comment any questions or comments you might have down below. Thank you.